In this video, I'm going to show you how to deal with glass buildings, which are buildings that are essentially made up of windows. I want to point out that I'm using a different picture than I have been for the previous tutorial videos, and that's because the picture that I was working with for the other videos doesn't have a glass building to show it with, so I chose this picture because it has a very prominent, simple glass building to show you this technique on. And we start this the same way we would start anything else, and that's just by adding a layer and tracing the basic shape. Something nice about glass buildings is they often aren't as ornate in shapes as like a pre-war building is. Okay, so we're gonna just make that big shape, and this is the side where the light is coming from. This is where we have shadows, so I'm going to choose a gray from here. I'm going to hit the letter G to fill it in. And actually, I think that I want to make it a little darker, so I'm going to choose a different gray, this dark one, and I'm going to hit the paint bucket again, and I just changed the color. I'm going to hit Command D or Control D if you have a PC, deselect it, and then make the layer for the next side. So I make layer 3, I use the polygon lasso tool, and it's okay if it overlaps a little. In fact, it's better if it overlaps a little bit from one layer to the next. And I just close that, and I'm going to use this gray right here, hit the letter G to get the paint bucket tool, Command D, and now I can see that I have these two. I can check to see how good of a job I did by turning the color layer on, zooming in. Good, there's no gaps. I see that the point here is not perfect, so I'm going to switch to the arrow tool, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys on my computer keyboard to nudge it over. Although it seems like this wasn't long enough, so I'm actually going to nudge it back down, and instead I'm going to nudge this the dark side down, so that way we don't have any spaces. Okay. Now I turn this layer off. To do the windows, we're going to need to turn one of the sides off. I'm going to start with the dark side, and I want to show you something really neat. If you hit Command on a Mac or Control on a PC while you select the thumbnail of a layer, Photoshop selects that layer. So right now we've just selected this whole layer. Now I'm going to turn layer 2 off, and I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to select the polygon lasso tool, and what I'm going to do is trace these lines. And I'm going to start with the horizontal lines, and I'm also going to start on the bottom because they seem easier to trace, and I always like to start with the easiest part first. Now hitting Option, which is a modifier key that lets us take away from a selection. So you only have to hit Option when you first click the selection, and I'm going to only do every other one. It's not so important that it be exactly the same as the actual building. The more accurate it is, probably the better it will look. But I think that doing each one of these lines will get really tedious. And I don't think it's so necessary. What is necessary is making sure that the lines you trace line up to the building. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to trace, and I'm going to skip a few. And every time I want to take away from the selection, I'm going to hit Option. You don't have to have Option down the entire time, just when you start. And what's great about these lines is it really shows us a sense of depth, which is why it's so important to get the horizontal lines accurate. We just keep going. I'm going to do one more. So I think I'm going to do two more because as we get closer to the top, they get really narrow, and I don't want it to look empty when I get to the top. So I'm going to do this one as well. And now we need to do the vertical lines. So it's the same thing, except now we're going vertically. So we want to make sure that we find the right line and we drop our vertical down. And we just move over a very little bit. And our marching ants are very close to each other, which is why they almost seem like straight lines. Now I'm at this point going a little fast because I want to get through the demo and make it sure it's not too long. But when you guys do this, you should make sure to be really careful, because the more careful you are, the better it will look. Okay, so now I have my whole selection, and this is still the dark side. And I turned layer 2 back on so we can choose which gray to choose. I'm going to choose this one, just the one right over, and I hit G for the paint bucket, and now I can fill them all in. If I hit Command D or Control D, I can see how effective it was. Now if I want, when this layer is deselected, I can choose another gray. I'm going to just go one over, and I'm just making a few of them lighter. And this shows the gradual stepping of the sun, I think. Not necessary to do if you don't want to. Ooh, look, I messed up. I accidentally hit the background. So now I can just hit Command Z to undo that. So we just want to be really careful with what we use the paint bucket for. Okay, now I'm going to do the light side. And it's exactly the same thing. And so what we're going to do is hit Command at the same time as the thumbnail. So now that thumbnail, or whatever's in that thumbnail, is selected. And now I'm going to turn layer 3 off. I'm going to make a layer on top of layer 3. And I'm going to select these lines. I hit L to get the lasso. And we want to make sure that these lines match up to the building, to the other side of the building, so that way it looks right. I think it's probably more important that it line up to the building than that it line up to, like, it's more important to me that it line up to the side that I've traced than that it lines up to what's actually in the photograph. So we also want to make sure that the ones that I keep in are the same. So I find that this is easier to do than the first side because the decision making is all done already. I've already decided at this point what I'm keeping and what I'm leaving. Now I just have to actually do it. So I'm hitting Option every time so I can modify the selection and take part of it out. You want to make sure that you go a little bit out of the selection when you do that, so that way you don't have little remnants and scars. And we're just going. Now if you want, you can just do the vertical lines or you can just do the horizontal lines. I would recommend not shying away from doing horizontal lines, since the horizontal lines are what gives you all the depth. But if you have a lot of glass buildings, it might be nice to mix it up so you don't have the exact same thing over and over again. And again, if you go with what's actually on the building, it's often easier than making it up on your own. Now this is pretty light, so I am going to have to figure this out a little bit on my own, but luckily I did the other side first, so I have a general idea of where the lines are supposed to go. So it's basically the same thing but opposite. I'm going to do Command Z because I don't love that one. And after all of this hard work, I want to actually like what I've done. And now I'm going to do the vertical lines. I can't really see the vertical lines on this side so well on the top, so I'm really kind of just messing around. And that's okay. Let's try it again. Undo to get my selection back. There we go. I hit backspace to get my selection back. I had accidentally used the polygon lasso tool without hitting Option, and that made me lose my selection. Once I hit backspace, I was able to get it back. Okay, and now I'm going to turn layer 3 back on to see the light side. Now I want to go, I think this is the gray that we went with. I want to go this one step inwards, hit G to get the paint bucket tool, deselect. And now I think I'm going to use bright white. And I'm going to use the paint bucket tool. Notice that now that I've deselected the shape, I can do one at a time. And look, now those apartments are on. There we go. And that is how you make a glass building. If we turn layer 1 on, the color layer, we can really see how effective it was. If you have any questions, please let me know.